Good morning. Here we are again. We flipped books. We flipped quarters. We got another one here. We started in here the last half of the book of Matthew, and we're Jesus has entered into his public ministry. He has gone around and he's been healing people and he's been ministering to people and doing that. In fact, the lesson here picks up actually in Matthew chapter 14. It starts in the very first part of that where Herod has John the Baptist killed, had him beheaded. And there's a story behind that we're not going to go through today, but yet the story is there. If you get time to read it, just go back to Matthew chapter 14 and start in verse 1 and go on down through there. And you'll see the events that led up to the beheading of John the Baptist. And one thing that we really ought to point out in that was John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. He was also the one that baptized Jesus in the Jordan River. So there's a closeness that comes. If you're watching this, you think about it back to the days when you were first saved and then where you were baptized and the brotherhood that you might have felt with the person that led you to the Lord or the person that baptized you, and there's a closeness there that's a spiritual thing, and it just is what it is. And Jesus has, in his humanity, he was affected by that. I believe that's where the scripture tells us at the beginning of this. It says that in verse 13, before where the lesson starts, it said, and when Jesus heard of it, talking about the murder of John the Baptist, he departed thence by ship into a desert place apart. He had to get out and get away from things. And that's what we were talking about in here. Sometimes things just pile up and you just really get whipped by all the stuff that's going on around us, and life gets hard like that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But it says that in verse 13, it says, and when Jesus heard of it, he departed from there by ship into a desert place apart. And when the people had heard thereof, they followed him on foot out of the cities. They followed along the edge of the Sea of Galilee there, and they came to it. And it says, and Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion towards them, and he healed their sick. And it goes on and it tells a story how that Jesus fed the 5,000 there. And it says there they had 12 baskets left over. If you've lived very long, you know what leftovers are, and that's what that was right there. But there's a thing. The disciples are seeing all this. They're following. They're followers, Christ's followers, and they're following along with him, and they're seeing all this, and they're encouraged by seeing people saved and seeing people come to know Christ, come to know Jesus. Know the Savior through Jesus Christ, and they're doing that, and they're seeing this, and they're how do I want to put it? They're on the mountaintop. Things are really going good, and here's Jesus, and he's the Son of Man, but he's the Son of God, and they're gonna mention that here for the first time here in just a few minutes, but they're on the mountaintop. You know the thing about being on a mountaintop, and I kind of made a little note about it this morning when I was brushing over this again. A mountaintop's a small place when you get up to the very top of the mountain. When you're riding the crest and you're right on top of the mountain and everything is going really good, that's good, but you just got to know that it ain't going to last forever, that there's valleys on both sides of the mountain. And sometimes we're in the valleys, and we have to look towards the Lord. And that's the lead up to the lesson here. But that's where these guys are at. I mean, emotionally and physically, they're right there with Jesus, and everything's going good, and it's like good deal. and this is just going to last forever. Well, it's not, and it didn't. And so I'm going to read a couple of verses before the lesson starts, and it says, "And they did all eat." This is talking about the 5,000 men. Actually, when you read that, it says, "And they all did eat, and were filled, and they took up the fragments that remained, 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside the women and the kids." But then the lesson starts. When you're there and you're on the mountaintop and everything is going good, you want that to keep going. And you want to always be able to stay there. But like I said a while ago, that's not life. It's not where we lived. And these disciples are fixing to find that out. And Jesus is getting ready to teach them a hard lesson. And it says, "And straightway," in verse 22, Jesus constrained, or he pushed his disciples to get into a boat and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. So, okay, he's there. He's the one they're focusing on. When you read this in Mark and John, and you read these other accounts of this, you see where the people are wanting to gather Jesus up and right there and make him king. And that's not the timing was not right for that. And so it says, "And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship." And actually it was a boat. The things were about 27 feet long and stood up about 4.5 feet off the water's edge. And it weren't a great big, when it says ship, that's King James English. It was not a great big ship. It was a great big boat, actually. And it says, "And go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away." And he's getting ready to do something here. But before that, it says there, "And when he sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart," or a high place, a hill, "to pray." It hurts when you lose a friend, a worker, a fellow worker in Christ, and somebody that you just count on, and you just believe that they're in your mind. You just always believe. It's kind of like your parents. You never really think that your parents are gonna die, but like this situation where like this was, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. He just needed, things piled up on Jesus. In his flesh, he was God. He was all man, but he was all God too. But he had to deal with these things and the emotion of them. And they just pile up sometimes till you think your top of your head's about to blow off. But Jesus, he said, he went up to a mountain. He got apart, away from everybody and everything, just to pray. And this was getting late in the day even. And it says when the evening was come, he was there alone. And there, when it says that could have been any time between 3 in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, when you see the mode of Jewish time, the way they did that, it was in 3-hour segments. And it was like from 6 in the morning till 6 at night, and then 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning. And that's how the cycles went. And as you know, the Sunday school, and this is the way it was counted then. And later on, we'll see Roman type of counting was 4 hours at a time. And as you see the crucifixion of Jesus, some of what is done there that might not make sense if you don't understand that begins to show. And I'm not getting very far with the lesson. But Jesus has gone apart on this mountain to pray. And when evening was come, he was there alone. And some time had gone on. That this is going to go on till up into the morning, early, what we would call it. You'd go like from 6 to 9, and then 9 to 12, and 12 to 3, and 3 to 6, and so we see that. But Jesus has gone up there, and we really don't know how long he was on the mountain praying there. It says, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea. And this is where the men are at. Remember, Jesus has constrained these men to go out into the Sea of Galilee with this in this boat. And these guys were, some of these guys, at least 4 of them, were fishermen. They knew the water. They knew what it was like to be out in the Sea of Galilee and how things like that changed. But it says there that he was alone, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with the waves, for the wind was contrary. I looked that up in that when I was studying that. They had the Sea of Galilee. It's fairly small. It's about 13 miles long and 7 to 8 miles wide. And it tells us over in the book of John that they were about right out in the middle of it. And they had been paddling and they wasn't getting anywhere, rowing. And anyway, but it says the ship was now in the midst of the sea, the middle of the sea, probably 3.5 miles out in there, and it's 7 to 8 miles wide, so 3.5 miles out into the ocean. Now, picture in your mind, it's dark, you're out in this boat, there's 12 of you at this point in the boat, and you're rowed up since evening, since dark, all night trying to get across there. And these guys are getting scared. They're getting afraid, and maybe with good reason in a worldly sense. Because I think about this. I thought about this a lot, and I don't know how far we're going to get with this lesson. But you know, sometimes we all feel like we're out in the middle of the sea and it's dark, and we're out there all by ourselves. We just feel like that there's no help, and even those that could help won't. And I always wonder, you know, how many guys was paddling and how many guys was in the bottom of the boat. That's another story for another time. But it, you know, we're the storms of life. We all think, well, we can handle it, whatever comes along. But sometimes things just pile up till you don't handle it so well. And that's the way these guys had got here, these disciples had got. The ocean, by the way, there's a thing, this wind that comes down out of the mountains, from the east side of the Sea of Galilee, that it comes sweeping down through there, called a sharkia. And it's an east wind, or eastern, or like we might call a nor'wester from big snowstorms that they've been having up in New England. But this churned these waves up to 10 or 12 foot high, and that's kind of scary. Me and 2 other guys was way back up at Wapapella up in the back of Lost Creek one time, and we were coming out there and the wind come up and caught us, and we sunk a 16-foot John boat up there with 3 of us in that thing. And so, you know, I'm just saying, it makes you a little bit shaky, and you think about things a little bit different when you do that. Some of them about how dumb you were to be out there in the first place, in our place. But these guys, they were out there in the thing, and their leader they don't know where he's at. He's up on the side of the hill praying, or they don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's sleeping up there, and they're the ones in the storm. And so the ship was in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, but the wind was contrary. And the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking. This was sometime between 3 and 6 in the morning. He was walking on the sea. By the way, just a little trivia thing. This is the only place in the Bible where it talks about, it's the only place, historically speaking, in the whole history, where it talks about 2 people walking on the water together. It's you know, just a little thing to throw in there. It says, in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were scared. The King James says troubled, saying, it is a spirit, and they cried out for fear. Now they're out in the water. Remember, where it's dark. They're paddling for all they're worth. They don't know where they're at. They don't know whether they're coming close to the bank or they're getting pushed further away from the bank or down. They just don't know where they're at. And they're troubled. They're scared. And all of a sudden they see what they think is an apparition, a ghost. Did you see that out there? You know, that what is that? And it said, it is a spirit. You notice in your scriptures there, that's a small s. It's a spirit. It's a ghost. They don't know what it is. But they were very afraid of it. It says they cried out for fear. And the idea there is that the boogeyman's coming to get them. I hate to put it like that. That sounds kind of childish and crude, but yet at the same time, that was a kind of fear that they had in them. But then we come up to the second word. It says, but straightway or immediately Jesus spoke unto them and said, be of good cheer. It is I, be not afraid. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's easy for you to say. You know, the ghost is talking to them and they're already in a panic. They're scared to death. But you know, the thing about this, again, as I was looking at it and reading it, and I thought, you know, for the Christian, we're told not to be afraid, not to be anxious about anything, but yet at the same time we are, because we're made up of flesh and blood, and sometimes things hurt, sometimes they hurt physically, sometimes it's just spiritually that we just hurt. And so, but the thing about it is, don't allow the fear to fester in your life, because the more you hang on to the fear, the more panic sets in. And, you know, people talk about heroes, and this kind of word is used over and over and over again, and we see everybody's a hero. Well, no, they're not. A lot of people just in the right place at the right time, and they didn't allow the fear to control them, and they just moved and did. And that's what Jesus is encouraging these guys to do, to go from being afraid that it's all over to being heroes to doing what Christ has called them to do. And so that gets us down to about verse 27. But in this is the first time we see it in your King James Bible. If it's written in red, it says, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Jesus is, you know, we could take a really good lesson from that and see that no matter what's going on around you, and believe me, there's a lot going on around right now in our lives, in our church lives. You know, we have called, I think he's a great man of God to be our pastor, but we've been without a pastor now for a few months, and you know, the flock is not scattering. It speaks well of the church, that the church is held together, and we're doing what we're called to do, and trying to enlarge ministries, not just staying in one place. And so that's good, but it's this, we've not allowed this fear of, what if, the what ifs to take over as a church. And I've been proud of my church over that. Excuse me. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be you, bid me to come to thee on the water. And, you know, take your, you know, pick yourself up, Peter, and come and see me, and come out here with me and walk by faith with me. And he said, and Peter answered him and said, Lord, since it's you, that's the way that comes out really. Bid me to come to thee on the water. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, remember, we've got these waves that they might be as much as 10 or 12 foot tall, and Jesus is out there like a spirit or a ghost out there, but they can see him in the dark, so he had to be fairly close to the boat. And it says when Peter came down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. In faith, he walked, and as long as he could keep his eyes. To back up on it a little bit, these guys that was in the boat, they were walking by faith, and it was easy to do when they were up on a mountaintop. But walking by faith is a whole different ballgame when not everything works like we want it to work. And so we just have to do that. But he said, but when he took his eyes off of Jesus, when he saw the wind was boisterous and the water was coming in every direction, the trials was just coming and just piling up on him, he got afraid. It says, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, "Lord, save me." You know, that's the thing. At least he knew what to say. With all that was turning around him, he knew where to go. He knew where to turn. And we give old Peter up and down the road all the time. He just catches it coming and going because of his tendency to talk when he ought to be listening and all that kind of thing. And you know, up to a point, rightly so. But what about the other guys? There's 11 other guys in this boat, and he's the only one with enough courage to get up, enough faith to get out of the boat and go to the master. And so anyhow, but Jesus says, immediately, that word there is straightway as well. It said, Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him as he was sinking, and said, "O thou of little faith, why did you doubt?" And there's this tendency to again, when things are going really good, then we're doing really good. But when things are not going so good, and we're begin to get down, slip down into that valley, we see hard times are not fun. They're just not fun. And Jesus kind of reprimands him a little bit there. He said, "O thou of little faith, why did you doubt? Wherefore did you doubt? You were doing so good." And even Peter later on, he said, "You know, if everybody else departs from you, I'll still be here, Lord, even to die with you." And so it came down to this thing that, you know, when the rubber meets the road, sometimes it's not a firm grip. You can slip a little bit. But then it says, and when they were come into the ship, that's Jesus and Peter, when they came to the ship and they got over in the ship, it says the wind ceased. It doesn't say that Jesus told the wind to stop, but the lesson was over. That's what I got out of that. The lesson that Jesus was trying to build their faith, to encourage their faith, because they're going to be facing some really hard things down the pike. And Jesus was building their faith that when these things come, and we see every one of these disciples, of course, Judas is going to be gone. Judas Iscariot, he's going to be out of the picture. But Matthias is going to take his place. And we're going to see that they're all going to die for the faith except for John the Revelator. And so there's trials coming, and they're going to get worse than a cantankerous sea that they're in. And so Jesus is building their faith in that. But there's a really, the last verse in this is something that's really good to see and good to know, that our Jesus is the Son of God. He is God, God manifested in the flesh. And we see that there. And then they that were in the ship came and worshiped him and sang of a truth, "Thou art the Son of God." And that's a capital S on that. So they are, it's getting clearer. Maybe they're beginning to see the other mountaintop ahead of them. I don't know that. I just kind of threw that in there. But at least they have come to a realization of who this Spirit that's walking out, that it's not just a spirit, little s, but a Spirit, capital S, that is walking out there, and the one that's going to deliver them from all of this. So anyway, I have to close, run out of time. And we're out of verses here. So just wanted to thank you all for tuning in with us. And again, if you'd like to have one of these books, Brother Jim always mentions it. If you'd like to have one of these Sunday school books, you call a church here at Temple Baptist Church at Poplar, Bluff, and we'll see that you get one. And in the meantime, God bless you, and have a good day. Thank you.